Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Winter, and I am the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent, non-commercial podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. The gender aspect in the EU R&D framework programs has long lived alive as sections of the R&D proposals that was not really taken serious. Standard generic 10-line paragraphs, rolling eyes, frowns, and in general being ridiculed as absolutely irrelevant. Those times are slowly fading away. The EU Commission keeps pushing for real gender-related reflections and input both in specific sections and organically in, for example, the excellence section. And the Commission has here shown itself ahead of time. Most people acknowledges, at least, that it is a subject you need to have an opinion about as a consortium. And if not, it won't be in that last 5% top tier that brings you the funding. It's that simple. The barrier has moved. I brought in two experts on gender and diversity in EU R&D proposals to the virtual podcast studio. Lachlan Smith and Jakob Feldtfos Christensen, owners of DiversiUNIty, which is a company supporting research organizations on diversity in research, and they also run the podcast Diversity in Research. Here we go through where in the Horizon Europe proposal you need to keep an eye on the gender aspect, and they give tips and hints on how to approach it. Please enjoy. The Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Now, the Timeline series has come to a formal end, but I have reached the submission episode that took me 22 episodes. So I hope you're gonna take advantage of all those very geeky, in-depth episodes on how to deal with every single step of the process. But it doesn't mean that I'm finished with the Timeline series, because there are many other little things, small little corners where it's very nice to get some generic information on how to deal with this. And that's what we're going to have today. I have a couple of guests. I'll get back to them in a second. So what we're going to talk about today is the gender aspect in Horizon Europe proposal. So and it has grown in importance as time has passed. I'm not going to say any more about that in this introduction, because I'm going to have two strong guys with me here who are specialists within this subject. So please, Lachlan, welcome. Jakob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you guys on board. And as we just discussed shortly, pre-recording, Lachlan, you go first. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I'm Lachlan Smith. I am a co-director at a company called Cloud Chamber, which is based here in the UK, and we're a research and evaluation consultancy. So a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last few years has been working with research funders as well as research institutions and academics, principally around helping them to win grants, I suppose, but more recently it's been focused a little bit more on questions of diversity and inclusion in international research and what that looks like. And prior to this consultancy role, I spent quite a few years working in UK universities in pre-award functions, so principally again supporting academics with their funding applications. And I'll let Jakob introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. And Jakob?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us here today. I'm Jakob, and I'm the director of DiversiUNIty. I've been working as a research advisor for 10 years now. I started at Aarhus University here in Denmark, working pre-award primarily with the social sciences and humanities. I was part of the first cohort of the IAMA certification in research management, and that's where I started to be interested in the whole area of gender and diversity, particularly because, as we'll talk about later, diversity in grants, mainly when we say diversity in grants, we often mean gender. But as an openly gay man, it's like, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. And that's where I moved into this, and particularly in the international aspects, and started working with internationalization, gave a presentation at the INOUNS conference in Edinburgh in 2018, where I met Lachlan. And we started working on these topics, and I founded the company in 2020, where we try to make diversity and internationalization work in research and research management. And do all my work in collaboration with Lachlan. And as we started the company right before the lockdowns, COVID lockdowns, we started a podcast because we were just there and couldn't really do anything, just as things were supposed to kick off. And that's when we started the Diversity in Research podcast, where we had you as a guest recently.
Yeah, and that is, we will have a short talk about that because it's sort of underlining your capacity on these things. Disclaimer, we already met online, me and Jakob and I. I was in your podcast, and I can strongly recommend Diversity in Research podcast. Because that's, so you sort of took your discourse of your company, what you wanted to get to professionally and start as a startup to deal with, and then you sort of, because of COVID, and you're sitting there and staring into the wall like everybody else. It's difficult to get out and get customers, right? So this is a way of getting out. Getting out there,
and like every other white man in that situation, we decided that what the world needed was more of our voices, so we started a podcast. And it has been absolutely brilliant, because of course we run around and do workshops and presentations and consultancy for research institutions and stuff like that. But this is an opportunity to go in depth in topics, both when it comes to research policy, and talk to policymakers, research managers, researchers within some of these fields, and really have a geeky conversation like you have here on research proposals. We have that on the internationalization and diversity aspects in research and research management, and particularly because, I mean, these are the two agendas are, and we'll probably dive into this later, the two agendas are tightly knit together, particularly when it comes to solutions, at least from our point of view. But it's also two agendas that don't necessarily go very well together, as we internationally have very different approaches to gender, but particularly when we move into other diversity aspects like sexual orientation, race, etc., etc. So sometimes research is a particular area that makes it difficult for itself sometimes.
Before we move into the main topic, do you want to present your company a little bit more, Lachlan? Do you have a few words you want to share?
I mean, I think the driver behind everything we do is about getting the best out of researchers, and therefore, getting the best research. Really, at the end of the day, we recognise, and I think, the research community recognises more and more these days, that if you actually want to produce good research that solves real world problems, you need diverse voices, and gender is part of that, and gender has been part of that for a long time. But what we try and do is get researchers, research managers, institutions, and funders to think a little bit more broadly about diversity and what that might look like in a research proposal, what it might look like in a collaboration, what it might look like in terms of the types of questions you ask, or the stakeholders you might work with in your research, or whatever it might be. So that's where we focus a lot of our resources. be it on postdocs who have just come out of PhDs and are starting their career, right through to senior research managers whose job it is to help coordinate and navigate the world of funding generally, but European funding in particular, and the complexities that come along with that.
Yeah, it's nice. I have a lot of sympathy for your beating heart for this. So we need more people that has both a beating heart and a will to change some of the things here in this world, right? So it's
definitely, yeah.
Let's move on to today's topic here. We will try to give the listeners a generic episode on the gender aspect in Horizon Europe proposals. And fly-in and background. So if we just, do any of you want to, I could, but I have experts in my virtual podcast studio. Could you give a brief fly-in on the history and background of the gender aspect in the framework programs?
I think, Lachlan, you just wrote a paragraph about
it. Yes, I probably should say something.
I'm going to throw you under the bus here.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. That's totally fair.
We will correct you if you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, thank you. I'm sure you have to. That's definitely the case. I expect to be corrected shortly. I guess I'd say a couple of things. I mean, gender in research more broadly has been talked about now for decades. It's fair to say. When we've talked about gender in research in the past, it tended to start from the point of view that we wanted more women to be in research positions. And that's, and alongside that comes other things around equality of pay, equality of promotion opportunities and things like that. But that's essentially, kind of where it started a little while ago. But in terms of how Europe has thought about this, the bit of work I did recently, which one day will hopefully be in published form, that's the plan, it's hopefully going to be in a chapter in a book, is looking specifically at the European sort of Research Council and the way they've mirrored equality, but particularly gender, in their proposal process. And so, it started with little things like eligibility criteria being changed to ensure that perhaps women who have had children aren't being disadvantaged by having career breaks and things like that. It moved on to CV templates to ensure that there was fairer comparisons between candidates applying. And then it moved into unconscious bias training and awareness raising for evaluators, because actually to address questions of diversity and gender within a research program, everybody needs to be on board. This isn't just about getting more women to apply or getting gender aspects of research to be included in research. The people who are evaluating it need to understand that they may have some unconscious bias, or there may be issues they need to be aware of and take account of when they're evaluating. So all of that sort of started to roll forward. There were opportunities to include costs, particularly within ERC grants around 2017, to help ensure equal opportunities and gender balance. So those costs were made eligible. But the most recent developments have been moving towards what's generally termed gender dimensions in research. So the best way to kind of think about it is, how are applicants, when they're applying for funding, addressing questions of gender and sex in research design? What does that actually look like now? We're moving on from, it's great, we've got 50-50 split between men and women on a team, but actually the research you're doing now is that also striking a gender balance? If you do your research, can you actually draw out gendered conclusions from your research, whether your research is particularly gender focused or not? So it has evolved over the last sort of 15 to 20 years, I guess, and we expect that evolution to continue into the future. And I know for people who are involved in applying for European funding, you'll probably know the questions of intersectionality, of greater questions of diversity, looking at other aspects of diversity, are in the pipeline. They're coming on stream. At the moment, gender remains the focus. So where I'm particularly interested in getting people to think about gender is more in what does it look like in research design? What does it look like in your research collaboration, as opposed to making sure that there's enough women getting a promotion within your research team, which is really important stuff. And it's not to belittle that, because it is really important stuff. But I think we need to move the conversation on a bit now, and it needs to be a bit richer, taking account that we still need to do all of that other stuff.
And if I could just add a supply a bit and say, because if you look at it particularly in a grant aspect, then I think the two big changes came with Horizon 2020, where you had to address gender equality somewhere in the team, and you had to address it, but still in a way where you could, and I am certainly guilty of that, you could get away of basically having a generic paragraph in a Word document on your computer, and you could copy paste it into any application, and then adjust it a bit and say, we know it's not really equal in gender, but we'll work on that. And then, but you had to address it some way, and that was a big step for many researchers. And then, of course, with Horizon Europe, you now had the mandatory gender equality plans that you, as a research producing organization, need to have in order to apply for EU grant money at all. And we'll probably get into those. They are a whole chapter of their own. And now, of course, as Lachlan mentioned, you have to do a gender analysis on the research itself, and not just on the team. So I think those are the two really big shifts broadly in for managers. A lot of what Lachlan says is big in the background, and something a lot of research managers don't pay enough attention to.
Yeah. And that was what we dug into in depth, because that was the core topic of the talk that we had in your podcast, right? That, and we can just briefly sort of paint the picture, because I've been in the proposal community, both public and private, all sorts, since 2008. And the thing is, people didn't care about it.
No.
At all. It was something the commission came with. Everybody thought it was a nuisance. Basically, you're like, why do we have to do this? And when it came, so I remember when it was introduced in Horizon 2020, people were frowning upon it. And you're like, in heterosexual research managers, so to say, you're like, everybody and advisors and so on. Why do we need? It doesn't matter if you do research on sensors for plastic. Why do we have to write something about gender and that? So that was the common approach to it. And I cannot honestly say that I have not also at some point frowned upon it.
No.
That's to tell the truth, because it seemed like a political enforced paragraph that you had to put, and nobody cared enough about it. They were happy enough to have 10 lines, and that was it. So it seemed like an odd thing that was just sitting there, sticking out from a coherent thing, and then it was like this.
And that's, I think that's pretty much, I think, unfortunately, a very telling tale about diversity in research more broadly. It is looked upon as a last minute add-on, as something we have to do, and it is. I think it's actually very problematic for the research community that is how we look at it, because when we talk about, because it speaks to an idea of research happening in a vacuum. It's just something that happens there, and then we do something there, and then society has to adjust to that. But the real world is actually quite diverse. It has a lot of races. 50% of the population is approximately are women. Pretending, but pretend. I mean, we're gay. We're here as well, and there are some significant differences there. Pretending that's not relevant, you are. I mean, what kind of signal are you sending to the rest to the outside world? I think it is, and that is, and we can of course discuss this later how that came into with Horizon 2020, and it became a strange add-on. The gender equality plans is a bit, perhaps wasn't the solution we had hoped it would be, but at least they're trying. They're trying to do something politically, and they are trying something that universities aren't unless they are forced. So we can laugh a bit at it, but they're actually trying to do something. And I would wish that universities would have done that on their own.
The conclusion from our talk, Jakob, it was that it was the Commission nudging slowly. Yeah. So to finish, so to say, my sort of framing was, what happened was that it was sort of premature to what the development and the view on gender equality and so on. So when that sort of wave came some years ago, it started sort of being more commonly acknowledged that something there.
Yeah.
That you need to deal a little bit more in depth with this, Me Too, gender equality, LGBT, and so on and so forth. Now, with the Horizon Europe, where they have upped their game with the gender equality plan. So it's they have sort of pushed it up a little first, sort of continuously, just stone by stone, and now it's sort of the development in society is supporting that. So it's a long way around to come to the conclusion that we came to, Jakob, that the Commission is doing what they're supposed to do as a political organization.
Yeah.
They step forward and say, this is important to deal with. And then you can say it was weird, but at least they did something.
Yeah, exactly.
and they're continuing that work. And then you can say, we had hoped for something to be bigger.
Sure.
But in all due time, because if you push too much for these things, then people are going to be pushed away by it.
Exactly.
Yeah, completely. And it's been a incremental process, and I'm sure there's somebody in the European Commission who will tell you that it was all totally planned this way, and they knew exactly this is how it's going to go. And I'm sure that's not reality at all. But it has taken the Commission to be a leader, because if we had waited for universities to take a lead on this, I think we'd
member states themselves,
Yeah, totally. So it's progressed positively, despite probably some resistance, but people are buying into it now, and I think more and more people are understanding the value, even if they sometimes are still struggling to work out what it might look like for their own research. They can understand the overall value of it.
That was a nice background and fly, and also with a little bit of sort of more in-depth exchange here on the background and so on for all these things. Now we're going to get a little bit instrumental here, right? So we will have a talk, and you will share with me and the listeners about, so normally modus operandi, so to say, for my timeline series episodes is that I say, okay, if there's anything related to the template, then I explain what's in the template. And then, like, how do you attack it? So first going through, so how has it been set up, and what is the thought behind, so to say. And then we, after that, we have a talk about how you would approach that. And we'll see, that's my normal way of working. If you think it would be better to take it piece by piece, this is what they say, this is how you would approach. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. But if we start with if we just look at the Horizon Europe template, and where as it is now, without discussing any nuances, what we think about it. So where do we have gender aspects to be aware of?
So I think one of the main challenges now, and what I think is incredibly good, and what frustrates a lot of researchers and research managers, is that now gender analysis is considered a part of excellence.
Yeah.
You have to address this as part of excellence, and I think that is a bigger and bolder move than a lot of people would have thought of, and is a bigger challenge, that you actually have to think these aspects through. And I think that's still a bit of a challenge for people. And I get it in some of I would say, I completely understand why you would think this is perhaps tricky in theoretical physics, in perhaps astronomy. We've recently did a talk on an Institute for Nanotechnology to how to do a gender analysis. So I think for a lot of people, there is a shift in how you think and how broadly you have to think about these topics, that particularly in some of these more theoretical areas. Of course, some of them, they will say, the commission, if you don't have to do it. But if they don't say that, you actually have to. And it will probably be a stretch for some people. But it is that idea that you have to think it perhaps through to an end user. And in collaborative projects, that you perhaps need to have end users present, that you have to work perhaps in more of a co-creation approach already on the proposal development stage, in order to get this right, because you can't solve all this with state-of-the-art references.
Yeah, you went directly to the solution.
Yeah. yes. Well,
we need to be pedagogical towards the listeners here, so they're sitting and staring at the templates, and you have some gender. So I have put, it's okay. You gave a taste of what we're going to talk about in 20-30 minutes. Now, what we're going to go. What I have put here is what I have dug out. As most of my listeners, regulars know, I don't work professionally with this anymore. So there might be some things that I slipped, but this is something I dug out on the internet, right? With people, presentations and stuff like this. So you have I put 4 bullets in this box. So you have intersectionality, sectionality, you have gender dimension in research and development, you have gender equality plan, and you have gender balance in research teams. These are 4 elements, right?
Yeah.
That is addressed in the template that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys, you need to explain us taking the first bullet, what is intersectionality? What is meant by that?
Sure.
Wow,
You go on.
That's almost, I was going to say, that's almost the trickiest one to start with. The others are probably more straightforward. I mean, intersectionality is essentially about trying to understand that people are more complex than one dimension. So, for example, we're 3 white men on this podcast, and we fully understand the irony of 3 white men sitting here talking about gender dimensions in research proposals. But
between 40 and 55.
yeah, pretty much. Yes, we could narrow it down even further, I'm sure. But the reality is, despite the fact that us being 3 white men here, there will be some intersectional differences between us. So as Jakob said, Jakob and I are both gay men. Jakob is from Denmark. I'm from Australia, but I live in the UK now. We've got Jakob's married, for example. I've got a partner. We've had different educational backgrounds. If you extend it beyond us, you'll have people of different race, you'll have people of different age, you'll have people potentially of different social class, different religions and faiths and things like that. And it's about understanding that even if you are looking at a question of gender, the question of gender is more complex than just gender, because not every woman is exactly the same, essentially. So it's applying a lens to research which acknowledges the complexities of looking at gender, because you might also be having to take account of race or age or other things as well. That's a really...
Because it can affect the work that you
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could affect your methodology. It could affect
Yeah,
your team. It could affect the type of the framing of your research questions, where you do your field work, if there's field work involved, all those sorts of things. So that's my explanation of intersectionality.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And how where do you need to deal with? Is that in the excellence section, or is there a section?
Oh, I feel like I should offload to Jakob on this one, because he's better with the form than I am.
Well, it's a bit the tricky thing that is probably a bit all over the place, and it depends a lot on the research. Again, if you're going into medicine, and particularly we'll look into how that it's linked to some illnesses will be will hit particular groups more than others, perhaps due to risk behavior or genetic differences, etc., etc. It could be linked to race, etc., etc. And while that seems quite obvious, we actually have a long history of not taking that into consideration in medical research. Both when it comes to testing new drugs, actually a lot of drugs are only tested on male mice as well. And when it comes into trial, it's only tested on men. Often side effects of medicine for women are only discovered after 2 or 3 years of actual use. So we still have a lot of these problems. So it's definitely part of excellence. It can also be part of methodology of how you're going to do this. And then of course it's also part of the impact section, because again, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And there is, even if we're talking about something hitting, let's say, the gay community, there's a big difference between being a white cisgendered man in Denmark with an academic degree and being a black transgender woman in London.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it can, and that's why you have to think these things through. So it is in excellence, but it's also in your research methods, depending on the project and of course in impact.
Okay, so just to explain to the listeners, how do the commission put this in the template that you need to be? How do they guide you on this?
Well, if you just look at the excellence and the first. Just the box right under excellence, it actually says in the 4th line that approach it a consideration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content. So it's up there as something you have to think through to it all, and it is mentioned. I think it's already mentioned in the objectives. I can't remember right now, but it certainly comes into to the methodology. And usually, right now, they still talk about gender. In some templates, I think it's in the Marie Curie program, they talk more about gender and diversity, and they have opened that up.
Getting more woke.
Yeah. The European Research Council, who would have thought they were the woke ones? No, but so it has been broadened out there. But there are in some of the documents behind all this where it makes clear that it is, when they say gender, it is gender and diversity. And right now, I just looked at this the other day, and I think there was somewhere where they talk about intersectionality specifically in the in the template here, but now I of course can't find it. But it sieves through the whole template. I think I think they're still a bit afraid of making it too specific, so it's more like spreading it out all over so people don't forget. And also because there's a big difference even when we look at in Pillar 2 projects. It's very different when you're looking at perhaps environmental technologies to looking at some of the more health or perhaps SSH projects that is directly linked into society. So in a template that has to cover everything, you have to be kind of generic and broad on this topic.
Okay, let's move on to Lachlan. Do you have anything?
I was just going to add the other area where it's implicit, it's not explicit, is in the ethics section.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the ethical implications of your research, so when you're talking about potentially harming vulnerable groups or working with vulnerable groups or different questions around ethics, essentially you could also be talking about the gender dimension of your research. If gender plays a key role or other elements of diversity, but if we stick to gender for now, and they're expecting you to address that in your methodology, as Jakob said, they ask you to explicitly address it in methodology. They ask you to explicitly address it in excellence. How are you addressing it in terms of ethical concerns? How are you going to make sure that no ethical concerns are raised, or if they are they mitigated and things like that? And it's often easily overlooked, I think. But it can just as easily apply to your ethics section as it can to others, even if it's only implicit.
That's a tip for you guys out there. That's bridging us into gender dimension in the research and development.
Mm-hmm.
Is that interlinked with this, I guess, with what we just talked about? But is it specifically, do you specifically have to address gender dimension in research and development in the excellence section like this? Do you have to have paragraph, like a section on it?
I would do that.
Yeah, I think yes is the short answer, isn't it?
Yeah. And then again, the actual shape of it can be very different again, and it's also, when you're talking about technology, the further the closer you are to basic research, perhaps, particularly when it comes to technology, when you look at the technology readiness levels, the further you get to basic research, the more difficult it will often be because it's so developmental. You don't really know what you're doing often. So just the idea of thinking it through to the end user. The higher you get on the technology readiness levels, I think the easier it would hopefully get when it is technology related. So I think there are and that is of course a tricky part, and why both grant writers and a lot of researchers don't really like it now, is that you can't have that generic paragraph anymore and then just plop it in there and say, and this is what we're going to do, because right now it's so directly linked to this specific project and what it is going to do. And of course it has to reflect, because, and I'm gonna jump a bit here, but because if you go down to the impact section, and you have to describe if target groups are mentioned in general terms in the work program, you should be specific here, breaking target groups into particular interest groups or segments of society relevant to this project. Mm-hmm. Does it say gender here? No, it doesn't. But no. Let's guess that's also what they're hinting at here. Some different, and of course,
but you can do it.
You can, but the moment you do that, if you have something there, it has to be reflected in the excellence part as well. You can't have it stand out there alone. So I think what is really clever of the Commission here, and I'm not usually one to say that many good things.
Come on, pat that
I'll
back.
pat that back. They have made it really clever here because you have to work it through all the way, and you can't make a generic solution and put it down on top of any application you write. You actually have to address it specifically in the context of the particular project.
Yeah, and that's also what other guests I've had mentioning around this, that you need to deal with it and you need to be more clever. But we'll get to that when we give some advice on how to approach this. But yes, it needs to be there and copy paste, stop copy pasting. Standard text. You need to be more clever than that. Okay, that's that. Then the gender equality plan. We've been talking about that couple of. It's been popping up the last 30 minutes. What is it?
What is it? Well, there's a good question. Essentially, well, the first thing to know about a gender equality plan is that if you're applying for European funding, as Jakob mentioned earlier, you've got to have one, and that's your institution. It doesn't have to be you personally as a researcher having a gender equality plan. It's the institution that you work for that has to have a gender equality plan. And they do helpfully explain within the application process what is meant to be in the gender equality plan. If you're getting to the point of applying and reading it and thinking, what on earth is this all about? There's maybe a problem. I'd suggest you go and talk to your research management team about your gender equality plan and making sure that you have one, which I think everybody does now. I'd be very surprised if there were institutions that were eligible to apply for EU funding that didn't. But essentially, it's about having a public document that the institution has signed up to put into place, which commits resources to supporting gender equality within the research institution. It provides some baseline data around gender, around students, around staff, and it has annual reporting requirements in terms of that data. It has a commitment to awareness raising and training around gender equality, unconscious bias training, which I talked about earlier, for staff and for decision makers within an institution, and those sorts of things. So it might talk about things related to work-life balance and organizational culture, gender equality in recruitment, career progression, and those sorts of things. So it's a public document that your institution has. And in terms of where it fits into the application process, well, it's pretty much just a tick box. Do you have a gender equality plan, which lists which covers the elements that they describe, which I've just sort of talked about. You have to share it. You don't have to share it per se with the commission. You just have to say, yes, we have it. It has to be publicly available. So if I'm an assessor and I want to check that you've got it, I need to be able to go on your website, your institution website, and find it. And for everybody out there, and I've not checked every European institution by any means, but every time I've ever looked for one on a European institution's website or an eligible body, I've always been able to find it. So I think most people.
And how is it? Can you make it look however you want to make it look? Or is there a template you need to follow?
No, as long as you cover the elements that they say you need to cover. So the stuff I just talked about, the training, the fact that it's public, the fact that you have some baseline
so there is
data. There's a structure. Yeah, there's a structure, and pretty much everyone I've seen follows that structure. I think people do the bare minimum. Let's be honest. To get this published, that's just the reality of it. Going back to the conversation we had at the beginning, so there is a structure. There's kind of a broad structure, but if you're the researcher, it's not up to you to be writing that gender equality plan. That should be done at institutional level. You might have input into it, and that would be great if you did, but you shouldn't be writing it.
And I think they specifically didn't make a template for it, because what you could do, particularly in the beginning, was simply to gather all the documents and strategies and policy you already had within this area, and then basically just make a part of your website that says we're doing this and this and this, and then link to those individually so that people didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So I think that's why they made a flexible solution. The challenge of that, of course, also is that the main question that we have heard every research manager be met with by management when this became mandatory was, how little can we get away with?
Yeah.
And that,
Yes.
which again, unfortunately, is telling of the level of ambition in this area for many universities. That being said, there are some brilliant ones out there, and there are ones who have gone beyond what is necessary and are looking at, as we talked about before, intersectionality and diversity more broadly, and have policies and make that part of it. So there are definitely some people out there, and the Commission is trying to push it. They're having some awards this year on the gender equality plans. If that's going to move the agenda a lot, I'm not certain. But it is a bit of an odd thing because it's mandatory, but who's going to check it? Basically, technically speaking, I think it's part of the auditors process, but are they equipped to evaluate this in a proper way, or probably not?
Probably don't have much
no
time.
Exactly. So in that sense, but it at least it forced everybody to have a good look on their policies and see if they met the criteria again. So it's probably it's a nudging. We should take it for what it is, and it's probably a good nudge in the right direction.
And also, because it's also private companies, right? I know your target group is the research universities, but this is for all partners that needs to.
Yeah, but in this particular area, I'm quite sure that this was aimed at universities. But if you look at the private sector, they have been working with gender and diversity for many, many years. And why do they do that? Because it's good business. Universities just haven't realized that yet. So I think this is clearly from the Commission aimed at universities, not private companies in Horizon Europe.
Okay, it depends what kind of companies we're talking about.
Of course. And where in the world. But if you look at how much money a lot of large companies are spending on this, they're not doing that for fun.
No. Okay, so that's the nature of this. And then the last bullet, gender balance in research teams. This is something that you also had in 2020, right? You had to sort of justify, or you needed to explain the composition of your team. I remember having done that when I was writing proposals there. So has that changed in any way since Horizon 2020, that part?
Not significantly, I think. It's more people now. Except that now I think we have more and more talking about how and that is how research, of course, has developed, that now you also have people who have to address when it's the other way around, that they actually have, where you have research areas where it's mainly women, why you don't have a gender balance in that way. And in that sense, I think it has broadened the perspective. I don't think the section in itself has changed significantly as such, but I think the thinking around it and how you think a research team, as we look more and more towards societal challenge, has broadened out. And I think at least there are some interesting ways to not get around it, but solve some issues that you perhaps can't with just looking at the team. Because the problem with this section is that it easily becomes a question of recruitment, and recruitment isn't the problem. The problem is retention.
I think we should move into how to approach
Let's
this.
do that.
Yeah. Because we keep walking around the approach. We keep coming with hints and so on. So let's just attack that animal. So I think if we sum up this, is that you have more things now you need to be aware of as a proposal developer and as a partner group dealing with this, but it's still a little weary, right? It's still a little still a little. What do you say in English? It's still a little thin. It's still a little. It's not. But it's, again, we're talking about notching as we started in the beginning, a little bit, just slowly, not pushing people, right? But let's just, because we got it there. Okay, it could be more sort of in depth. There could be more things you had to be aware of, forced to be aware of. But let's just take the face of it and say, this is what we have. How do you advise, or how do you work? Because you also write proposals yourself, right?
Not really.
If
we can avoid it, but sometimes,
just like me.
In my day job, I do.
I want to live a long life. I don't want to die of a heart attack at 50. Now, how would you approach from broadly? How would you approach the gender aspect in Horizon 20? We have these 4 elements that we just went through. How would you approach it, or how would you recommend people to deal with them?
So if you start with the easy one, and then that's a gender equality plan, and then you can say, we have that.
Yeah.
Don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. That being said, another reason for starting there is, if we look into the research group, let's say, basically, if you have a problem there, technically speaking, you should be able to go into your gender equality plan, and there should be a number of tools on how you will work, how the institution works with gender. So there should be some tools there on an institutional level that you could include in this to rectify this problem, if there is a problem. So in that sense, you could actually use the gender equality plan for something meaningful and not just tick a box. Those are the 2 perhaps obvious things.
Yeah,
those are low-hanging fruits.
Then
and this is perhaps a bit the other way around, because as Lachlan mentioned, the ethics section, it easily becomes something we set a lot of ticks a lot of boxes at the end of the process. This is perhaps a good place to start and consider it, particularly on a gender. Let's start with gender, because that's what they require. We would always recommend that people have a broader diversity look at things, but they say gender, so let's stick to that for the moment at least. And then say, are there some particular problems with the ethics when it comes to women? And if there are, how can we flip them in the project and not only solve it so we don't do any harm, but actually do something good? So we use the ethics section for something intelligent instead of just tick some boxes at the end of the process. And let it help you to think through the actual research, because if you just look at the idea from the outside as a researcher, you're so involved in the research itself and probably the technical or theoretical or methodological aspects of it, that it can be perhaps a bit tricky to get into the gender dimension of research, even if they are there.
They don't think about it.
So you just don't think about it. It's not because people are particularly evil or anything, or want to harm women. They just don't think about it. And this is perhaps a way of getting into that thought and see, were there actually some things that we should take into consideration? And then it's, of course, looking at thinking, and it's so difficult because, as we talked about earlier, so it differs a lot. But that is also why it's so important to have a broad team when writing the proposal, and having different people, because representation matters. No matter how much we might pretend it doesn't, and we want to reduce people to a PhD degree or an age index. Representation matters when it comes to these things. So do we have a broad team that can, and will we allow them to bring those perspectives to the table? Are we shutting them down? Because if we're shutting them down, it doesn't really matter. So it's a lot about actually creating a culture in the application process where you have a broad team and you create a culture where people think that what they can bring to the table also when it comes to more protected personal characteristics like gender, sexual orientation, race, etc., actually brings value.
And you might want to add that this is something you should be doing. Shouldn't be doing this when you enter the last 2 weeks of the process.
Yeah, please don't do this the last 2 weeks.
No, just make sure, just because you will have the time 2 months before, 3 months before, just try to get a reflected discussion on this. And then try to do just a minimum amount of desktop research, because what most of our listeners would say, but there's nothing. It's not relevant. But Google, for Christ's sake. Google your research topic, gender, report.
Yeah, exactly. And it will be out there.
You will find something there, and then you're clever. My listeners are clever people, right? Yeah. They're doing difficult stuff. So you guys out there, please, dear listeners, you will be able to make a nice to take that information and massage it to something that actually makes sense. And it makes sense, and not something that's just forced 10 lines of "we respect."
No, exactly. And actually, the European Commission has had a large amount of projects, particularly on this topic, and there have been produced a number of free resources on gendered innovations. And there's gendered, I think it's just called Gendered Innovations 2 report.
I think so.
Which it was produced by the Commission, where they had a number of experts from different fields, AI, environmental research, medicine, all over the place. They had experts coming in talking about the gendered aspects of research in these different fields, and it provides some very good both practical examples, but also approaches and references if you want to make it more academic. So there's actually on this field, the Commission has basically made the handbook for it, and you can of course, if people don't know it, we can link to it in the show notes. If
yeah, sure, I'll leave the link for
that. And it is actually quite good and quite practical in that sense. So there really aren't any excuses. You don't, and I think even at this place, and we talked about exactly what do you want to do and where does it say you have to do it. They're not very specific, and I think that's also on purpose because this is so new. So there's still it's still possible, I think, to just try things out a bit. And I think it's also a question of respecting that this is new. So I think you don't have to get it perfect, but you have to try.
Yeah, but I think if you show a will to actually get some meaningful paragraphs and reflections in there, then you tick the box. You went into the last 5%. That has you made a beautiful 3-4 month effort to making this, and this is something that's going to take you a day maximum. But you're standing out as someone who is as a group of partners that has actually taken this seriously, and shown that there is an element there that you gave some food for thought within you. There's already things going on in your research field or technology field, and you're of course aware of that as the good research partner.
And the thing is that probably if you then don't just write it, but actually do it as you should, because the Commission isn't doing this to be mean to people. They're doing it because it's important, because we actually do have a problem of not taking gender aspects into consideration in research. That's why they're doing it. If you write this and actually do it, you will also have better research. You will have better research, more meaningful research that takes into account that the world is different, that what you're doing, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So it's not just a writing exercise. This is actually something.
It's not just window dressing.
It's actually something that will make your research better. And we should, I think so. We should always remember that when we talk about this and when we do this. And actually, they do follow up. We have heard a couple of times. We've been approached by a couple of consortia where they are where they have had their first evaluation with the project officer from the commission, and they're being told you're not doing enough on diversity.
Yeah.
You have a real problem here. So it's not just something they're saying. They are looking into it, and they will come after you if you're just writing it and don't do it. So it is, you have to have a plan for it as well and actually do it.
Lachlan, did you? Because I think I broke you up. Like, I'm so sorry, but I think you wanted to say something.
The only thing I was going to add, because I agree with everything Jakob said, but just from a really practical point of view, in terms of what you can do.
Please.
What I always encouraged all the researchers that I worked with when I was working, one-on-one in institutions, is as soon as you've got the shape of an idea of what your research is, and you want to apply to Horizon Europe under this particular call, then sit down with the people in your research management team, or come and talk to us if you want to, if your university allows it, and just map it out on a piece of paper. I used to get academics to work on a whiteboard. Just map out your research for me. Talk to me about what you're going to do. Talk to me what your team's going to look like. Talk to me about your research questions. And then I would just sit there as a sounding board and can probe and say, so you've got 6 guys there and 2 women. So you're already a bit unbalanced on your research team. What is it about these 8 people that you're working with that makes you think that they're the right people for the job? Can we tinker with that at all? Can we do something about that? That research question you're asking, have you thought about what that might mean from a gendered perspective? And just get that initial thought process going, because all of this, I think, becomes so much easier if you can get into the mindset really early on in the process, before you've even started trying to fill in the box on the application form. Just bounce the ideas off other people. Like Jakob was saying, having a diverse team to support you in that application process is so important, and that diversity extends beyond your research team, but to the research managers, the research support, the consultants, your best friend who you might want to chew their ear off about your research project, whatever it might be. But please do it as early as possible, because if you do it, as you were saying, like with 2 weeks to go, you're going to get yourself in a right pickle, a real mess.
It's just going to be it's indifferent. You can as well don't put anything.
Yes,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Really? And I think the 2 main questions, I think, when you're looking at gender analysis, are 2 of the main questions, at least, we suggest when we run workshops on this is to ask, what am I not seeing? And 2, who can help me see it? Because you can't cover it all. And if you don't know the answer to question 1, if you don't know the answer to question 1, then you definitely need somebody to help you see it. Exactly.
For question 2.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I really hope you're listening out there, guys. Ladies, sorry.
Y'all.
That was... Everyone.
Y'all. My dear listeners, I hope you're listening closely to this, because it's going to help you all so much. If you sit and work with this, it's tips like this. It doesn't take anything compared to the long process you will be dealing with. The work, exhausting work you will be doing with so many things. It doesn't take a lot.
And if we should perhaps say something about the composition of the research team, I think it's easy to say, to look at how many men and women are there. And of course, you can't really, the tricky thing, of course, and why they're not really moving into these perhaps other aspects, is you're not allowed to ask about it. You're not allowed to ask about sexual orientation, race, and et cetera. Yeah. So in that sense, it's really difficult to say anything about it, because technically speaking, you don't necessarily know. But if you look at gender, one thing is if you have the representation, but you should also have a look at where are these people in the organization or in the project. Are the women PhD students? or are they work packet leaders? Are they represented where decisions are being made, or is that still the middle-aged white straight men who are doing that? Yeah, us. Exactly.
No,
But still, yeah.
I'm
but we could be
representative.
closeted, so you wouldn't know.
Exactly.
but still, so there, I think there's that added aspect to it to be aware of, and that goes for diversity more broadly as well. Is you also have to look at who's at the table when decisions are being made. One thing is if they are there more broadly, but who's at the table?
Yeah, and you can say for proposal developers, there you have coordinators and proposal developers. This is something where you have a power, where you have something to say. And I've been sitting in that position as a proposal developer at least, and say, look, it's simply not good enough. It's men. All 8 work packages we have men. It's not okay. So pushing at least at that level with technology proposals, but at least trying to push some women in to some, at least just having a little bit of balance, right?
Yeah, and I think it's because and particularly if you have
not just in the citizen part.
Yeah, but still, I think if you have made a construction where all work package leaders or people in deciding functions are men, then you've been lazy. It's not because the women aren't there.
Yeah.
You've just been lazy and picked the usual suspects and the guys you like hanging out with. It says more about you than it does about the research field.
I tend to agree, because it's all about a network. It's all about what you exactly. And you're like you take the shortest route, right?
Yeah.
And if you know people, then I've been working with them before.
It is, like and we're always last minute with the application, and we have to make decisions. So there are some tricky parts to write. So what's easy to do? That's decide who's work package leaders, and we know him and him and him, and they'll do good. So we put them in.
Actually, I think we I think we're good. No?
Yeah.
No, but I think we haven't we covered more or less the most, like the most important things for people to be, because now we're sort of talking about the same thing.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So if we're talking about how to approach it, I think we have been. You should get the idea out there.
Yeah.
You have the idea now how you could approach these things and look like the clever pupil. Pupil.
We should perhaps just say something, perhaps to here before the last questions about where these things are going, because I think it's important, because we said they do say gender, but they do mention intersectionality, and there are some of these supporting documents where they mention intersectionality quite explicitly. So I think we'll be moving in that direction quite soon. And also the Commission released a report on gender equality plans, on what they called gender equality plans plus, or inclusive gender equality plans. And I think when they release something like that, it's a hint that people should take, that the next generation of gender equality plans will not be about gender. They will be more broadly, and they will require things on sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, age. It would be a lot broader, and everybody can choose to be surprised and do something in panic like they did with the gender equality plans, or you can read the tea leaves and start preparing now, because it's coming, and I think we agree that it will be at least by the next framework program, but probably before.
I think this is also what we talked about, Jakob, in our episode for your podcast, that they are just slowly putting on more things, right? And making people follow it so they don't push them away. But I agree that there's probably gonna come more, and they have something. They have sections in the commission where they discuss these things and have some long-term planning on how to slowly.
Yeah, and if you should put it,
at least something. There's some sort of discussions there how they should add more, qualified a little bit.
Yeah, and if you can add a bit more of context also when we look at the reform on. Agreement on reform of research assessment, where you have both the Commission and the European University Alliance and a lot of individual universities and research funders signing up for this. They mentioned diversity quite explicitly. So we will be looking at how we assess research and researchers quite differently in a not too distant future. And a lot of key players are involved in this. And diversity is one of the key principles there. How exactly it's going to look, we don't know, but it's just to say it will be more complex than bibliometrics and Twitter followers in the future. So people should get prepared for these things.
And with those words, we move on to the list. Lachlan, do you have anything to add here?
No, nothing to add. I agree with all of that. Keep an eye on it because it's only going to get more. Well, depending on your perspective, more complex or more exciting, more of a burden or more rewarding. I think, but
you should. You know what? Out there, practice.
Yes,
get used to it because you need to deal with it more.
Yeah. Because we are doing research for the real world, and the real world is complex and diverse. Unfortunately, that's how it is.
Nah, it's not. It's good.
Yes.
That's how the world is. The Grand. No, I always have a segment since I started recording my first episodes. The segment's called The Toughest Challenge. And I especially applied it to the timeline series to sort of get people the idea, okay, what is the hardest nut to crack, and then give an idea of how to deal with that. But so if you would, looking at this, looking at the gender aspect in Horizon proposals, what's the toughest challenge to integrate this in the proposals? What would you say would be the most difficult thing? If you take on the eyeglasses of a proposal developer, what's the most?
I mean, I'm going to be slightly abstract, perhaps, and say that for me, the most difficult thing is getting into the mindset, because once you've got into the mindset and you can understand what taking a gendered dimension, what a gendered dimension to your research or research generally looks like, I actually think it's not that difficult to address within the application form. Like getting into the mindset is the difficult bit for me. And that's where people struggle because they insist that, no, there's no gender dimension to my research. There's no gendered aspect at all. And there's never been that way in my area. So getting into the mindset is the key bit. And you might need somebody to help you to get into that mindset. And that's okay. That's totally fine. But getting into the mindset is the challenge for me.
I think you're right. Because there's nothing. What the things that we discussed here, we went through. This is not. It's not rocket science.
No.
To make something. To make a nice approach with these things in the proposal. I guess probably the most challenging. If we talk. So if we say so we have the mindset, but maybe if you want to be more refined with your proposal and have a little bit more into the content if it's not specifically related to diversity. So if it's technology project, there of course, if you want to be that refined, but you don't have to. Not at least yet. It might be so in framework program 10 or 11. But the things we're talking about here, I think you're perfectly right. I think that's the approach to it, to take away the filter of the way you look at this. It's okay. let's try to change the filter a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the perhaps dangers sometimes when we ask researchers to do it, because that there are people out there, researchers, who have built research careers on writing about gender in research, and you think you have to match that, and you don't. And it's better to start than to try and do something than being paralyzed because you have to think you have to do it all and do it perfectly. And I think that is perhaps what is the biggest, one of the toughest problems, is that we tend to believe we have to do it all, and then we do absolutely nothing. And then I think perhaps also, if I can have two toughest challenges, is that this is a topic that covers for everybody. Gender in research is not a topic for women. This is something that is relevant for everybody, and we have to understand that. As long as we keep pushing it to be something that only women should cover or minority groups should cover, and it's their responsibility, we're going absolutely nowhere. And that is a big problem right now.
That's correct. It's a framework thing, right?
Yeah.
Structural thing. Yeah. Indeed. With those words...
dire words of warning.
Yeah. We will wind up this episode. I'm just going to land the plane before we say goodbye to the listeners.
No, and I think if you can just say, suggest people, also in the gender innovations, also look at the Commission also released a guide for reviewers where they mention stuff about gender and diversity and considering those things. And there are some brilliant examples of absolutely mind-blowing dimensions of research that you had never thought of, where you can just see this is just going to make things so much better by adding this. So looking at the examples can be truly inspiring in many ways. It certainly has for us.
Do you have is there some links or something that?
Sure, we can send some of the links through, and there's also a very good book called Invisible Women, where they talk also about research, but society more broadly, how we don't think about women aspects of broadly in society, and it is absolutely scary to read, and shows just why we need to have a gender dimension in research.
Good, because then there's further reading for people who want to dig into this. Thanks. Dear listeners, thank you for listening to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this. You enjoyed this very, very nice talk and walk through the gender aspect here we had here together with Lachlan and Jakob. Don't forget to check out the full universe back catalog that I'm building up on thegrant.eu. I have passed 50 episodes, and as you know, dear regulars, you get one per week coming out to you. I keep trying to build up strong, nice content in all kinds of directions, which indeed this should be a clear proof of, that I really want to dig into all corners of important things within the EU R&D funding world. Also, don't forget to, if you sympathize with what I'm doing here, it is a spare time initiative, a non-commercial and independent. If you do sympathize with it, please, what I need, and these two guys, they know what I'm talking about. I need you to enlist on my email list. Go and subscribe to my email list. That is the best way to build up a podcast as a podcast startup. So please do sign up there. It helps me a lot. So thanks in advance for that. Again, Lachlan, Jakob, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be staying in touch, because there will be things to discuss also in the future. So I will get back to you guys in the future for episodes where I need your strong competence on this.
Sure,
Yeah.
it'll be fun. Yeah.
But let's say bye to the listeners. Huh?
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Sorry. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.